Imagine a moment of pure happiness turning into an unexpected tragedy. A young couple anxiously awaits the arrival of their twin children. For them, this was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. But the instant the babies come into the world, something happens, something no one expected. This is the channel you love, and today you will hear a story that touches the heart. A tale of love, prejudice, pain, and reunion. Stay with us until the end, because the final revelation will leave you speechless. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment the city you're watching us from. Your interaction is very important, so these stories can reach more people. Now take a deep breath and get ready to feel every emotion of this journey. It all started 20 years ago, when Laura, a fair-skinned young woman with green eyes, fell in love with Marcos, a hard-working man from a humble background. They met during college and soon realized they had something very special. Their love was true, but there was an invisible obstacle. Marcos's family never fully accepted Laura. "She's not for you, son. You come from different worlds," his mother used to say. Even so, Marcos and Laura decided to stay together. When Laura got pregnant, they were radiant. The wait for the twins brought new meaning to their lives. Every ultrasound, every kick in Laura's belly was celebrated with emotion. They planned an amazing future for the babies. But fate had other plans. When the day of the birth arrived, Laura was rushed to the hospital. Marcos held her hand, trying to calm her. "Everything will be fine, my love. Soon we'll have our children in our arms." But something in the doctor's eyes signaled concern. The delivery was complicated. Hours later, the baby's cries echoed through the room, but there were no smiles. The silence from Marcos was broken by shock. One of the babies was white, with features identical to the mother. The other was black, with curly hair and deep, dark skin. The doctors exchanged glances. The nurse hesitated before handing the twins to the father. Marcos stood paralyzed. He loved Laura, but something inside him began to scream. How was this possible? Laura, exhausted and pale, held her husband's hands and whispered, I wanted to tell you before, but I was afraid. Marcos, my grandmother was black." The words came out between sobs, but Laura couldn't finish the explanation. Her body trembled. The heart monitor beeped frantically. The doctors tried to revive her, but it was too late. Laura died there, holding the tiny hand of one of the babies. Marcos was devastated. The love of his life was gone in the blink of an eye. He looked at the children, confused and shaken. His heart was at war. Then he made an unthinkable decision. Marcos left the hospital and never came back. This story is just beginning. What happened to the twins? How did they grow up? What did fate have in store for them years later? If you want to know, keep watching. But first, write in the comments, "I am committed to the truth and will always strive to be a better person." The hospital was silent that early morning as the doctors mourned Laura's death. The two babies lay side by side in a small crib, unaware of what had happened, but the absence of their father would be felt for the rest of their lives. The medical team tried to contact Marcos, but he didn't respond. After several hours, it became clear he wouldn't return for his children. "What will we do with them?" asked one of the nurses, her eyes full of tears. The hospital's social worker was called, and with no other option, the babies were taken to a local orphanage. Two newborns, without a mother, without a father, unaware that fate would lead them down completely different paths. The orphanage staff quickly noticed that the twins drew attention for an unusual reason. One had white skin and light eyes, the other had dark skin and curly hair. Despite being biological siblings, they were seen differently by the couples visiting the orphanage for adoption. And that changed the course of their lives forever. The goodbye. The years went by and the brothers grew up together. In their first month, still babies, they slept hugging each other, as if sensing they were all they had in the world. But one day, everything changed. A family visited the orphanage and immediately fell in love with one of the boys. It was a well-off couple with a strong desire to have children. They began visiting frequently and quickly grew attached to the white baby. The couple tried to adopt both boys, but the social workers hesitated. Adopting siblings with such different appearances could be a challenge in a society that still carried prejudice. Moreover, another family had already shown interest in adopting the black baby. Then the inevitable happened. The brothers were separated. The white baby was taken to a comfortable home full of toys, love, and opportunities. He grew up never imagining he had a twin brother on the other side of the city. His new name became Mateus, and he was raised as an only child by loving, successful parents. The black baby was adopted months later by another family with fewer resources, who raised him with the little they had. His name was changed to Samuel, and he grew up facing challenges from an early age. The brothers were torn apart without understanding, and over the years, the connection between them seemed to fade. But fate still had plans for them. Mateus grew up in a wealthy neighborhood, attending the best schools and receiving everything he could want. His parents never told him he was adopted. To him, life was perfect, without mystery or questions. Samuel, on the other hand, grew up in a humble neighborhood, facing hardship from a young age. He learned early about the weight of discrimination and prejudice. At school, he heard comments about his dark skin and curly hair. He wondered why he was different, why he didn't resemble his adoptive parents. But he never got answers. Years passed. Each went on with life, unaware of the other's existence, until one day, a routine exam at a hospital triggered a discovery that would change everything. What happened for the brothers to finally uncover the truth? How could a simple exam reveal a secret kept for 2 decades? If you want to know, keep watching, because the story is about to get even more emotional. 20 years had passed since the day the brothers were separated. They had grown up in completely different worlds, with no memory of each other. Mateus, now a young adult, lived a comfortable, successful life. He studied medicine at one of the country's top universities, following in the footsteps of his adoptive father, a renowned cardiologist. He was always surrounded by affection and opportunity, but deep down, something felt incomplete. Samuel's life had been very different. Raised in a poor neighborhood, he had to fight for every small achievement. He worked from an early age to help his family and never had the luxury to dream big. Still, his heart was full of hope. He wanted more out of life. He wanted to understand his origin, but never knew where to begin. Then, an unexpected event brought their paths together again. It was an ordinary day when Samuel began to feel unwell. Severe chest pains led him to seek help at a public hospital. At the same time, on the other side of the city, Mateus was doing his medical residency at that very hospital. He was about to finish his shift when a nurse called him. "Doctor, we have a new patient in the emergency room. A young man with unusual symptoms. Can you take a look?" Mateus picked up the clipboard and started reading the patient's information. His heart raced when he saw the birth date. It was exactly the same as his. Curious, he walked into the room and saw Samuel for the first time. For a moment they stared at each other. Something about the young man's dark skin felt strangely familiar to Mateus. They had the same height, the same face shape, the same eyes. But how was it possible? Samuel in turn felt a strange shiver looking at that doctor. It was as if he was staring at a version of himself, reflected in another life. Mateus tried to shake off the feeling and continued the exam. "Hi, I'm Dr. Mateus. How are you feeling?" "Tired, kind of dizzy," Samuel replied. Even their voices were similar. During the conversation, Mateus asked routine questions, but when Samuel mentioned he was adopted and had never known his biological parents, something stirred. Inside Mateus, he too was adopted, and also knew nothing about his birth family. Then a nurse entered the room holding Samuel's chart. Unaware of the tension in the air, she said, "Curious, doctor. You and he have the same birth date." The world seemed to stop in that instant. The two looked at each other, trying to understand what was happening. A coincidence, a mistake, or something much bigger? Mathias felt his heart race. A terrifying truth was about to be revealed. Intrigued, Mathias requested a blood test for Samuel, claiming it was a routine procedure. But deep down, he knew he needed answers. When the results came back, the shock was immediate. The tests showed an extremely rare genetic compatibility. More than that, they shared the same DNA. Mathias read and reread the documents several times. There was no doubt Samuel was his biological brother. The ground disappeared beneath his feet. Everything he knew about his life until that moment was called into question. "Samuel, I think we're brothers," Mathias said. Samuel laughed, thinking it was a joke. "What? What do you mean, brothers?" Mathias handed him the papers. The truth was, right there in front of them. Samuel was speechless. He had always wanted to know where he came from, had always wanted to find his family, but he never imagined that destiny would lead him to his own doctor. The two remained silent for a long time, trying to process everything. And then came the inevitable question. If they were brothers, what had happened to their parents? They knew the answer to that question could change everything they believed, and they were right. What had happened to their parents? Why were they separated? And what secret from the past was still hidden? If you want to know, keep watching, because the revelations are not over yet. The hospital room felt too small to contain the whirlwind of emotions overwhelming Mathias and Samuel. They searched for answers in each other's eyes. This can't be real," said Samuel, shaking his head in disbelief. "But it is," replied Mathias, still holding the test results. "The results don't lie. We're twin brothers." The weight of those words hit Samuel like an electric shock. All his life, he had felt alone, not knowing where he came from. Now, out of nowhere, he discovered he had a brother. And more than that, a brother who had lived a completely different reality from his own. "If we're brothers, where are our parents?" asked Samuel, his chest tightening. Mathias took a deep breath. "I don't know anything about my biological family either. My parents never talked about it. But now we need to find out." And that was how the search for the truth began. Determined to understand their story, Mathias and Samuel decided to look for the hospital where they were born. With the name of the maternity hospital in hand, they drove there, hoping to find some clue about their past. When they arrived, they were greeted by an elderly receptionist who seemed to have worked at the hospital for decades. "Can we see some old records?" asked Mathias. The woman raised an eyebrow. "What kind of records?" Samuel hesitated for a moment, but then spoke firmly. "We need to find information about our birth. We think we were separated as babies." The receptionist's expression changed. She sighed deeply and pointed down a hallway. "The old files are in that room, but I don't know if you'll find anything. Many documents have been lost over the years." With hearts pounding, the brothers entered the dusty room and began searching through the time-yellowed papers. After nearly an hour of searching, Mathias found an old medical file. When he read the mother's name, his eyes widened. "Samuel, here it is. Laura Santiago, our mother." Samuel's heart raced. They finally had a name. But then Mathias frowned as he read the notes. "Wait, this doesn't make sense. It says here that she died shortly after childbirth." Samuel felt a lump in his throat. "So that's why we were put up for adoption." Mathias turned the page and found another note. "And there's more. It says our biological father abandoned us." The air seemed to vanish from the room. "He left us," whispered Samuel, his voice filled with a mix of anger and sadness. Mathias turned to him, feeling the same pain. "We need to find this man." And that's exactly what they did. Based on the hospital documents, the brothers discovered the full name of their biological father, Marcos Vasconcelos. Without wasting time, they began searching for everything they could find about him. After a few hours of internet searches, they found an old profile on social media. He was a man with graying hair, tired eyes, and the location indicated he lived in a nearby town. Samuel's heart beat faster. "Do you think he'll want to see us?" Matthias sighed. There's only one way to find out. With a mix of anxiety and fear, they got in the car and drove to the address. When they arrived, they found a simple house worn down by time. Matthias knocked on the door. A few seconds later, a man opened it. He had deep wrinkles and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of a difficult past. Upon seeing the two young men in front of him, Marcos frowned. "Yes?" he asked, confused. Matthias took a deep breath. "Marcos Vasconcelos?" "Yes, that's me. Who are you?" Samuel felt a chill run down his spine. "We're your sons." The man's expression changed instantly. His face turned pale, his hands began to tremble, and he stepped back as if he had seen a ghost. This can't be true. But it was. The brothers had found their father. Now the only question left was, were they ready to hear the truth? What had happened in the past that made Marcos abandon them? What secrets had he kept all these years? If you want to know, keep watching, because the revelations are far from over. Silence hung in the air for a few seconds, but to Matthias and Samuel it felt like an eternity. The man before them, the father they had never known, looked at them with a mixture of shock, guilt, and something that resembled fear. Marcos stepped back, trying to process what he had just heard. This can't be true," he murmured, as if trying to convince himself. But then his eyes focused on the young men's faces. He saw the resemblance, the features of the woman he had once loved and never managed to forget. His shoulders slumped, and he swallowed hard. I knew this day would come." Matthias and Samuel exchanged glances. "So, you knew about us?" asked Samuel, his voice thick with emotion. The man sighed deeply and opened the door. "You better come in. We have a lot to talk about." The house was simple, with old furniture and a strong smell of coffee in the air. Marcos sat on the couch and motioned for the brothers to do the same. For a few seconds, he remained silent, staring at his hands, as if gathering the courage to say something long buried. Then he took a deep breath and began, "Laura, your mother, she was the love of my life." The mention of their mother's name made Samuel hold his breath. She was an incredible woman, smart, sweet, strong. "We met in college and fell deeply in love, but there was a problem." He paused before continuing. "Her family never accepted our relationship." Matthias frowned. "Why?" Marcos hesitated. "Because I'm black." Silence filled the room. Samuel felt a tightness in his chest. "So what?" he asked. Marcos gave a sad smile. "To many people, that means nothing. But to Laura's parents, it meant everything. They were traditional, conservative, and never accepted their daughter being with a black man." Matthias clenched his fists. "That's ridiculous." Marcos sighed. "Yes, it is, but at that time there wasn't much we could do. Laura got pregnant, and when her family found out, it was a scandal. They tried to force her to leave me, but she refused. She said she loved me and that we would raise our children together." Samuel's heart raced. "Our children?" Marcos looked directly at both of them. "Yes, you two." The man ran his hands over his face, visibly emotional. "Laura and I ran away. We wanted to start a new life, far from her family's judgment, but it wasn't easy. I worked day and night to make sure she lacked nothing during the pregnancy." He paused, swallowing hard. "But then, everything fell apart." Matthias and Samuel leaned forward, sensing something very serious was about to be revealed. On the day of the birth, Laura had complications. The doctors did everything they could, but she didn't make it. His eyes filled with tears. "Our mother died trying to give us life," said Matthias, his voice breaking. Marcos nodded slowly, his eyes glassy. "She was strong, fought until the last second to make sure you were born healthy. But in the end, I lost her." Matthias closed his eyes, trying to contain the pain rising in his chest. "And that's why you abandoned us?" he asked, voice laden with emotion. Marcos looked away, ashamed. I was devastated, lost. I didn't know how to raise two babies alone. And then the worst happened." He paused before continuing. Laura's family showed up at the hospital. Samuel and Matthias held their breath. What? Her parents? They were furious, blamed me for their daughter's death, said I had no right to raise you. Marcos lowered his head, his voice heavy with pain. They threatened legal action, saying I didn't have the financial means to care for 2 newborns. I fought with everything I had to keep you. He paused for a long time before finally saying, but they were rich, powerful. They forced me to give up custody. Matthias felt a chill down his spine. So they separated us? Marcos nodded, tears finally escaping his eyes. Yes, they decided one of you would be put up for adoption, and the other would be placed with a family they chose. Samuel put his hands on his head, feeling dizzy. My God, that's cruel. Marcos closed his eyes as if reliving that moment. I never wanted to abandon you, but I had no choice. Silence once again filled the room. Samuel looked at Matthias, trying to absorb it all. All his life he had wondered why he had been abandoned. Now he finally had an answer, and it was far more painful than he could have ever imagined. I searched for you all these years, said Marcos, his voice breaking, but I was never able to find you. I failed you. I failed Laura. Matthias wiped away a tear streaming down his face. Then why did you never tell anyone? Marcos looked at him, eyes full of guilt. Because I was afraid that you would hate me, afraid it was too late to try to fix things. Samuel took a deep breath. And now? What do you want us to do with this information? The man hesitated for a moment, then looked into his son's eyes. I just want a chance to prove that I never stopped loving you. The silence that followed was heavy. Matthias and Samuel had a choice to make. They could forgive him or move on without looking back. But before they could decide, something unexpected happened. Someone knocked at the door. Marcos got up to answer, and when he opened it, his face turned pale. Outside stood an elderly woman, with the same eyes Samuel saw in the mirror every day. My God, murmured Marcos. Matthias and Samuel stood up, trying to understand what was happening. The woman looked at them, and her eyes filled with tears. My grandsons. Who was that woman? What did she know about the past that had yet to be revealed? If you want to know, keep watching, because the most shocking part of the story is still to come. Silence took over the room. Marcos was paralyzed in front of the woman who had just appeared. His face showed a mix of shock, regret, and something else, fear. Samuel and Matthias exchanged confused glances. The woman seemed fragile, but her eyes carried an intense depth, as if they had seen and lived through far more than they could imagine. Then she broke the silence. My grandsons, I've waited so long for this moment. Samuel felt a chill down his spine. Grandsons, he repeated, trying to understand what was happening. The woman smiled with tears in her eyes. Yes, I am Marcos's mother. Your grandmother. Samuel took a step back, trying to process the information. This doesn't make sense. Marcos rubbed his face with his hands, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Mom, what are you doing here? She looked at her son with compassion, but also with firmness. I came because it's time you all knew the truth. Samuel and Matthias stepped closer, attentive. What truth? Asked Samuel, feeling something even deeper was about to be revealed. The woman took a deep breath and sat down, motioning for everyone to do the same. I know Marcos told you part of the story, but there are things he never had the courage to say. Matthias frowned. What do you mean? She looked at Marcos, as if waiting for him to speak, but he only bowed his head, unable to face his sons. Then the grandmother continued. Laura didn't die from natural complications during childbirth. She was left to die. The impact of those words made the brothers' hearts race. What? Exclaimed Matthias, shocked. Marcos raised his head, eyes red with emotion. Mom, please don't. But she shook her head. They need to know. Samuel leaned forward, his chest tightening. What are you talking about? Her voice trembled, but she went on. When Laura went into labor, She was taken to a private hospital owned by her family. There she begged them to call Marcos, but they didn't allow it. Samuel felt a knot form in his throat. They stopped our father from being there? The grandmother nodded, her eyes filled with pain. Yes, Laura was weak, but fighting to survive. If she had received the proper care, she could still be alive today. Mateus was in shock. So that means her family. Yes, interrupted the grandmother. They did nothing to save her. They let her die because they didn't want her to raise you with Marcos. The air grew heavy. Samuel felt his hands tremble. That's monstrous. Marcos slowly nodded. I only found out the truth years later when I went to the hospital. Laura was already gone, and you had been taken away. Mateus took a deep breath, trying to absorb it all. So they didn't just separate us. They were responsible for our mother's death. The grandmother wiped the tears from her wrinkled face. Yes, and that guilt has consumed me to this day, because I did nothing to stop it. Samuel and Mateus were completely stunned. But why didn't you do anything? Asked Samuel, his voice choked. The grandmother looked down as if reliving a painful past. I was a coward. At the time, I was a simple woman with no power. Laura's family was influential and powerful. I knew that if I tried to fight them, I might never see Marcos or you again. Mateus clenched his fists. So you just accepted it all? She swallowed hard. I tried, but in a different way. After Marcos lost you, I spent years trying to find you, but they erased every trace. Samuel felt his chest ache. And how did you find us now? The grandmother smiled, a look of sadness and relief in her eyes. After you appeared on TV, I immediately knew who you were. Then I discovered you were looking for your father. She paused and looked directly at Marcos. And that's when I realized it was time to end this lie. Marcos ran his hands over his face, visibly emotional. Mom, I never told that part because I didn't want them to hate me. He gave a humorless laugh. Not hate? After everything they did? The grandmother sighed. Son, I know it seems impossible, but hate brings nothing but more pain. Samuel took a deep breath. And now, what should we do with this truth? The grandmother looked at her two grandsons with a hopeful gaze. Now you must decide whether to continue this story with love or with revenge. Silence filled the air. Samuel and Mateus knew they had discovered something that would change their lives forever. Now, there was only one choice: to move forward or to confront the family that had destroyed their lives. But before they could decide, something happened. Mateus's phone rang. He answered, still dazed by everything he had heard. This is Mateus. This is the hospital. We have a problem. His heart skipped a beat. What happened? It's about Miss Laura. We need you to come immediately. Samuel and Mateus exchanged looks. But Laura died during childbirth. The silence on the other end of the line was disturbing. Then the voice replied, We have something to show you, and you won't believe what you're about to see. What had the hospital discovered? What else had been hidden all these years? If you want to know, keep watching, because the final revelation will change everything. The group walked down a narrow hallway to a reserved room. As soon as they entered, the doctor took out an aged envelope and placed it on the table. This file was recently found in an old section of the hospital. It was confidential and should have been destroyed years ago, but someone kept it. Mateus looked at the envelope as if it were a bomb about to explode. What's in there? Asked Samuel, feeling a chill down his spine. The doctor took a deep breath before responding. The last medical notes about your mother's childbirth. Samuel and Mateus exchanged glances. Their hands trembled as they opened the envelope and began reading the documents inside. Each word was like a stab to their hearts. The report revealed details that had never been disclosed. Laura arrived at the hospital conscious but weak. The doctors performed tests and noticed something. She was healthy enough to survive the birth as long as she received the correct treatment. But then something happened, a serious mistake. The document indicated that Laura was given the wrong medication, which caused severe complications. Samuel felt his heart race. So this means her death wasn't natural? The doctor slowly nodded. Yes, it was a medical error, or something worse. Mathias clenched his fists. And no one ever said anything? No, said the doctor, but there's something even more troubling. Read the end of the report. Samuel's eyes quickly scanned the paper until they reached the final words, written by the doctor who assisted Laura, and that's when everything changed. Patient conscious. Request for transfer denied. Mother did not survive complications and died in the operating room. The doctor paused before continuing. Marcos, your father, was present the entire time. He was informed about Laura's critical condition. But after her death, he made a decision. He chose to leave the babies, believing he had no means to care for them alone. It was a desperate decision, but it's what happened. Samuel felt the guilt and sorrow in every word. How could their father have made such a difficult decision? The pain was immense, but now he began to understand what really happened. But there was something even more important, the reason Samuel and Mathias looked so different. As they went through the papers, Samuel found a record that caught his attention. Laura's mother was mixed race. Her father, who was black, came from a family with strong African roots. Though Laura had been raised in a predominantly white environment, the story she had kept in her heart and never had the chance to fully share was revealed in that moment. Her black heritage came from her maternal grandmother, who was the daughter of a black man and a white woman. This genetic line had been passed on to Laura and consequently to Samuel and Mathias. Though their father was white, Laura's blood carried her black ancestry, and it had been present in them since birth. That explained the physical difference between the brothers, one with lighter skin, the other with darker skin. Now they stood before a new reality, one in which they understood not only the complexity of their family origins, but also the deep connection they shared with the history of their roots. If you've followed this story this far, leave a comment. A mother's love never dies. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this emotional story with someone special. See you in the next video.